Welcome to the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast, a weekly podcast discussing innovative ideas in business and technology from unconventional and often overlooked sources. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with my other host,
Wyatt Carson. Hello.
Hey. So this week I figured we would do something a little bit different, new year, new me, 2023. Rather than just discussing, ideas in business and technology, maybe we can kind of take a little bit to reflect in 2022, talk about goals for the new year. I know you are super sentimental, most New Year's resolution person there is, right?
No, obviously Tanner's setting me up here. We had this talk that I'm not a giant fan of the concept of New Year's resolutions just because they don't really stick. It's kind of a running joke. Everyone makes a resolution, and then in 30 days or so it's gone. I went to the gym, January 2nd, and it was like shoulder to shoulder and weird. And but in 3 weeks it'll go back to normal. This sort of thing. I hope everyone stays. That'd be awesome. But I'm not a giant fan. But with everything you and I have been working on, with my day job, with everything, 2022 was actually a really cool year for me. And it has caused a lot of kind of reflection and introspection and to kind of, I've started thinking, oh man, what's in store for me for 2023, or what can I work towards? So I completely became a giant hypocrite, and I started thinking about resolutions. I don't call them resolutions because I hate that word, but they're goals for 2023, which are resolutions. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think 2022 could be an interesting year for you and I to talk about. Half of that year, you and I were actively engaged in an idea that we're trying to make into fruition. We started a podcast. All sorts of crazy things happened in 2022. And I just wanted to hit on that and reflect on it. And, I think this is kind of a normal time for people to sit back and think about the last year and look forward to and anticipate this next year. So there's nothing wrong with talking about resolutions, right? I need to stop being such a jerk and so hard-headed and just accept that things are okay for people to like.
Yeah, I was thinking about it's good to take some time to reflect and be, a bit of gratitude of what was good with it, but also identify the things that maybe you fell a bit short on or didn't work out. So that would be the first part, of this episode we can kind of reflect on. So looking back on your 2022, pick one item, I think, to start with that was really transformational for you or a big thing, and we can discuss that.
Sure. So in probably May or June, I went through a solid 2.5-3 month period where it seemed like I was kind of bedridden with various illnesses for a long time. I don't know if you recall, but I talked in our friends group that I had massive dental work, and it all. Let me back up. I apologize. The dental work was kind of an impact of something else. So I was with my family at this funplex thing with go-karts and laser tag and stuff like that, and everything was going fine. And I was doing laser tag with my family. And I mean, I won. That's the important thing here. But after I left laser tag, we went to the little cafeteria food court thing they had there. And I was sweating like buckets, like excessive sweating. I'm not a huge sweaty guy, and I was just laser tag. But I was just buckets. Flop sweat, I guess, is what it's called. And I'm sitting there wiping with napkins, and they're getting soaked. My wife's looking at me a little concerned. And finally she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I feel weird." And I apparently lost all the color in my face. I was just dripping sweat. Long story short, I got rushed to the hospital. I was having all the symptoms of a heart attack. For reference, I'm 36 years old, so it was not a heart attack, fortunately. All of that's healthy. What I did get diagnosed with was this inflamed lungs, like a constant inflamed lungs. It's some sort of asthma thing, basically. And in my mid-30s, I got diagnosed with asthma, and I have an inhaler, and I got this new medication. Well, this medication plus the inhaler I was supposed to use all the time for a while. I didn't know, I don't know if I read the instructions right or what, but something happened. And apparently if you use inhalers regularly and you don't continually wash your mouth, rinse your mouth every time you use an inhaler, there's this thing called inhaler mouth. Well, I already had bad teeth. I've seen the dentist a million times in my life, but things got worse, and I developed an infection in my jaw, and it perforated into my sinuses, and so almost heart attack, asthma, and then this long, long bout of just the worst pain of my life, multiple doctor visits to fix things, and long story short, and then, flu and all this stuff. I was in bed for a long time, over summer basically, and it gave me a lot of time to think about my health and what I needed to do for myself. And that kick-started my health journey I'm on. I used to be in the Army. I was always fit, things like that. And I let that slide. But I was like, you know what? I got to fix this. So I took my inhaler and I started going to the gym. I started weightlifting. And, I'm 6-7 months into a weightlifting journey, and I freaking love it. I'm obsessed with it. I go I try 5 times a week, realistically 3 or 4. If I was 4, if I'm being average. But it's been life-changing. Going to the gym, creating that routine. I'm not the most disciplined person in the world, and more so than just physically what it did for me, mentally what it did for me was exponentially more. It made me feel more confident. I have this, dealing with some imposter syndrome, which would probably be a fantastic topic for another podcast episode. Mark that down. Actually, we already talked about that. But anyways, it did wonders for me mentally, and it cleared my head so much that I started doing weird things, like starting a podcast or starting a business venture with Tanner from McCook, Nebraska. And it just, I don't know. Other than physically, mentally, it made me a stronger person. And that's been, of 2022, of all these horrible things that happened to me in bedridden and sick, it all turned into a really positive thing, because I'm sitting here now doing a weekly podcast with my friend. We have a regular viewership, which is amazing. I mean, we're not in the thousands. We're not monetized. It's nothing like that, but we enjoy this. This is really fun. We have people comment on it. And we're working on a business that you guys might have heard about 2 episodes ago, give or take. It was kind of just things fell in place from a really negative thing and turned into a really positive for me. And I like to look back on that. And that was a turning point for me, I believe.
Yeah.
That was a long story. I apologize, but
No.
I needed some background on that.
I think so much of what you're talking about too is I can relate to, because probably one of the biggest transitions for me as well has been taking my exercise and diet routines and bringing them back. So when I was in school, I was a heavy set guy. And when we were done with school, out of college, and kind of working on our own, I got up to around 280 pounds, I think was my biggest. And when I was I think 22, I decided to change that. And so our friend Shane, he wanted to gain weight. And I think he was like a 180 at the time or something like that. Dude. And he's a tall guy.
But he's like 6'5" or something. So
yeah, very tall. And that was a very lightweight for someone of his stature. And I was 280, and we wanted to meet in the middle. And because he wanted to bulk up and gain muscle, and I wanted to shed pounds and also build muscle. And so we went on kind of a weightlifting journey, and I never lifted weights in school. I was thinking about school recently and how I really didn't learn very much in the classes. It was always outside of them. And I kind of regret not really spending the time learning a lot of those PE things. But I learned weightlifting with Shane and barely lift the bar. You were so we were computer nerds, gamers that didn't do anything. We had no real upper body strength or endurance or anything like that. And so over the course of a year, I lost 100 pounds, which was just monumental. Completely changed my diet, quitting pop, all those things, and really lost a lot of weight. With that, becoming a little obsessed with it. There's negative things that happen too, but overall it was a good thing. And then just as you get older, I would always get in sprints back where I would join the gym with some friends, but I always needed somebody to do it with me to kind of hold me accountable. And I just kept creeping back up with weight. And so last year, I had a child, Roman, in late December. But
adorable.
And with that, like right after he was born, and this would have been early January, I threw my back out holding him. Mm-hmm. And it scared me because I'm not the most young person, period. I'm 37 now. That was 36 at the time. And I went to the doctor trying to see, like, well, one, how can I prevent this? And the doctor at the time told me, well, you're overweight. And I think I was maybe, goodness, I don't know, 220 pounds, 225 pounds or so. And I had tried to lose weight recently. I think at my peak, I got back up to around 240, which I guess is considered actually obese for someone of my height. I'm almost 6'2".
Hmm.
So, that's right around that cusp, I think, of a BMI index. And so he told me every year it's easier and easier for someone to gain a pound, but it's harder for them to come up. So guys that get older, they tend to add 1 pound a year. By the time you're 50, well, you're probably an extra 30, 40, 50 pounds overweight and you really can't get it off. So he said I need to take focus on that, really you know, build back to a good weight and kind of just try to maintain that as I get older, and then I can play and have the energy levels and do things with Romans. So I'm back down to about 187. My goal is to get down to that 180 range, which is pretty great. Ultimately, the weight itself is not the most important thing. It's the lifestyle. So we cut out a lot of junk and things like that. And like you, I've been doing a lot more strength training and cardio and things like that. And rather than going to a gym where I have to go outside and try to be motivated to do so, I built a little home gym in my basement.
Okay.
And that's been fantastic. And like you're saying too, building up these little habits to keep going. Man, every night I'm excited to get onto the bike. I'm excited to lift weights. I'm excited to do these things. But that was really the first habit that I got into this past year that's really made a huge impact in my life. And I went to the doctor this year, or I guess last year still, since we're in the new year, but I went back to the doctor a few months ago for a physical. And he was talking to me and he just looked at my chart and he was like, holy crap, you're almost out of overweight category now, getting back to what is a standard BMI for someone of my height and age. And it was really rewarding. And I find like, oh, I can play a lot more. I haven't thrown my back out. I have a lot more endurance in doing those things. But ultimately, like you said too, I have a lot more energy and I feel like a lot more clarity in my life.
Hmm.
And we can touch on this when we talk about 2023 goals, but I read a book recently and there was a line talking about how knowledge costs energy. So you can think about anything that you want to do. Your brain has a certain amount of finite of expenditure it can do towards things. The stronger you are, the more energy and resources it has. The weaker you are, more run down, the less it does. And knowledge itself takes up that energy. So the more that you have, the more you can process, the more you can put on your plate, and the more you can do stuff. And part of when we get into 2023, I'll talk about useless energy that I don't want to spend things on and keep that more focused. But I thought that was a really neat alignment. You're talking about like, oh, now I have the energy to do these expenditures and these things. I think that revelation of like everything you do costs energy. And now that we're keeping ourselves mentally and physically more in shape and more fit, well, that gives us more energy to expend on things that perhaps are worthwhile.
That makes perfect sense. Absolutely. Like we lived it, and it's cool to see that there's someone who wrote a book who agrees with what we're experiencing and can put it into better words. Because you might be, but I'm no wordsmith. So yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. That's wonderful. It clears your head. It allows you to focus on more positive things. I'm not down on myself as much. Self-esteem is better, which leads to you wanting to get out and try new things and do new things and experiment and go out on a limb. It's all just kind of like the snowball effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it took me getting out of my bed and going to a gym, and it was hard. And it's just kind of snowballed into these cool things. And my day job has improved. I'm starting this new venture. I'm doing this podcasting thing. I'm working on a project. I got a classic car this last year. That's not me. I'm not a car guy. I don't know crap about mechanics. Anyone who's interested, I got a 1974 El Camino. Dream car. Love it. Anyways, absolutely. And it's really cool to see that. So,
Before you want to go over, I just like to say I absolutely love that the most important thing to both of us is not something external. It is something that we took upon ourselves internally and really built our foundation back. And it's not because you didn't say, oh, 2022, the best thing that happened is, oh, I got an El Camino.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't, oh, I started this podcast. Oh, I got something changed with my job. Oh, I got, bought something or had this. It's no, I built myself up better to enable myself to do those things.
That was well said. You're right. We really focused internally, and I think that's paying off dividends for us.
Mm-hmm.
In many different facets. That's absolutely it. That well said. Yeah, I like that. Wow, look at us go, being mature and everything like that.
Yeah.
No, but I love focusing on this positive, but just to recap, let's talk 2022 before we move into 2023. Maybe something that was a little difficult, something you're willing to share on a podcast, maybe a challenge you overcame or experienced in 2022 that you hope you don't experience again, maybe. What was that experience in 2022? Because all 365 days weren't fantastic. They weren't amazing. So for you, this last year, what challenged you, I guess?
So I want to say my biggest challenge kind of goes back to that theme of knowledge is energy, energy and knowledge. I not even spent, still have this problem, wasting too much time on like dopamine hits, whether that be the endless scrolling of apps, the constantly searching of the next YouTube video, or checking of messages to see if anyone's alerted. I've been so in this like seeker consumption mode that I've been trying to actively break myself from. And I'll find myself where I try to keep my phone away at night. I'll put it in the charger in the bedroom and try not to be on my phone. And I'll be good for a day or two. And then before you know it, I'm just back on the couch, laying on the couch scrolling. And it's that by far has been one of my biggest struggles that I'm still trying really hard to overcome. And it affects you in so many ways because one, you are bombarded with, of course, the super machine that is our marketing world right now, and it makes you want things. So I find myself just kind of fixating on weird things. Like recently it was leather jackets, and I have a leather jacket that was bought for me, but it's too big now. Again, lost some weight, wants clothes that are form fitting. So it's just started this little search of like, oh, I should look for another leather jacket that fits me. And from that, it was just a spiral of down, well, how much do I want to spend for one? What kind of style do I want? Ultimately, I find a style, but what color? Maybe I need multiple colors so they can go with different types of clothes for different occasions. And then before you know it, you're down this rabbit hole of it's not about the coat. It's about this whole like sense of being and not even like what it is. And you just face these weird existential pressures then that shouldn't happen. You should be able to just, oh, I need a coat, go to the store, find one that's, the right price, right quality that fits well, and that should serve its purpose. But with the power of the internet and this weird dopamine machine that it is, I just fall down these rabbit holes. And that's something that going into this year, I'm really trying to fix. So that's one of my goals. We'll talk about getting in once we hit that section.
Okay, that's good.
How about yourself?
Jacket. I like it. So as I asked you that question, I had to seriously start thinking about mine. But I think it's pretty obvious when I really look at it. In 2022, I dealt with overcoming fear. And I know that sounds very grandiose and a little cliche, but let me explain. COVID. Let's talk COVID. That still exists.
Mm-hmm.
COVID was rough on me and my family. Not only did I get COVID, but I was ultimately fine. I lost my taste and all that good stuff for a while. I was in bed for a couple days. But what happened, the impact of COVID I'm talking about, and I think a lot of people experience this, is I got laid off. I moved back to Omaha for a job. I had a company seek me out. They headhunted me. They wanted me. I even turned the job down. And they came back and renegotiated because they just wanted me. And it made me feel so good. And it was a tech startup, something I'd never experienced before. I've always worked very corporate, Fortune 500 jobs. And this was a company that was going places. So, we did it. And my family, my wife and I both went to college in Omaha. And we bought our first house here and we moved away. But we realized we liked Omaha, so it wasn't that bad of a decision. But we moved here, and exactly 1 year after moving here, I got laid off. What the heck do I do now? I got a promotion to come to this job, and life was going good for a while. I really enjoyed my job, and I got laid off. And I was unemployed for a very long time. And we're talking hundreds of resumes. People, lots of other people have experienced this with COVID. Hundreds of resumes, interviews, presentations, and side jobs. And, I delivered packages for Amazon for a while. And what else did I do? Oh, I managed a, what's it called? Spirit Halloween. Yeah. And it was a humbling time for me, we'll say. It was a very scary time. And, fortunately we made it through, and I found another job and life got better. But I found I was kind of gun shy now. I'm just waiting for the next time I get laid off because it was so horrific. We came so close to financial devastation for my family. And fortunately, we were able to overcome that, with the help of family and all these side jobs. But I was terrified for most of this last year, just waiting to get laid off again, because thinking, there's no way I can do this twice. There's no way I can pull that, twice, and then recover and get a good job again and support my family. I was terrified, and it took a lot of work, and I don't think I'm out of it yet, but I did kind of come to a better place, and a place of acceptance, and a place of finding how to mitigate that, I suppose you could say. What could I do to, if not prevent that, to kind of help prevent that, I guess. What could I do to cushion that from ever happening to me again? And that led me down a better path. But so much of my job this last year, it was me just trying to do awesome so I didn't get laid off again. And that's a horrible way to live. It's like you're living on the edge. You're just waiting for that shoe to drop, Gosh, that was rough. So that was definitely my challenge in 2022. And I feel like I'm almost over that hump, but it took a lot. Really did.
Yeah, one of the things that what you just said resonated with me is kind of that feeling of vulnerability.
Yeah.
When you're in your day to day so much, you just get kind of comforted and insulated from reality of the outside world. You get complacent on how good things really are, and you don't really appreciate those things. But when there is that big change that happens, you realize actually how vulnerable you are to change and act,
Totally.
to all those things. And I think one of the best ways to really keep yourself from being kind of fearful, like you're talking about, is through taking action. Mm-hmm. Because by doing, you're going to just have failure. Because most of the time you're going to do something, you're going to fail, you're going to iterate, to do a Wyatt thing, and make it better, and eventually you'll succeed. It's that whole meme of how many times Thomas Edison had to create the light bulb before it worked. But by facing failure, and embracing that trying something and failing is not necessarily a bad thing, nor does it make you vulnerable. You're strengthening yourself, you're conditioning yourself through action to make yourself more resilient. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, one, we talked about the amount of energy to have the resources to do that, but also this later part of the year, by having a podcast to do every week, by having our little side gigs that we're trying to do, by having our full-time jobs that we do, by having our family, and all these things we're constantly doing and taking action, and we're no longer just kind of being fearful and hopeful, and so I think that's been a big change for both of us, really, in this last year.
Yeah. We instead of just letting things happen to us, we're diversifying our skill sets, our reach, our network. We are realizing exactly what you said, very well said, that we're susceptible to change, and that complacency could get you in a bad spot. Mm-hmm. And having that hard punch in the face of reality allowed you to maybe take that extra step, get out of that comfort zone we wouldn't have originally. If I had never been laid off from my original job, and I was still doing that, and I got complacent, and it was a pretty cushy job sometimes, I don't know if I would be here today. I don't know if I would have taken a step out of my comfort zone and said, "Yeah, sure, I'll start a podcast and put my life out on the internet. Why not?" That wasn't me. But wanting to better myself, diversify my skill sets, it really led to some positive things. And I think that's a good lesson people can take away. Is if you ever are terrified of the world impacting you, you are terrified of outside forces hurting or impacting you, what steps can you take? What can you learn? What can you do to help insulate you, to give you that protection? You know, it's never going to be foolproof. The world can crush you. Things happen. But there are small things you can do. And the number one step of that is realizing that you're human and you are not invulnerable. You know, the world will impact you. And realizing that and getting out of that complacency zone is really step one.
Yep. The other thing too is while you're in that comfort zone, you're really just relying on others to provide you with the things rather than going out and searching yourself. And like you were saying with what you're afraid of, you're afraid that someone else will let you keep your job in a sense, right? Not that they're not laying you off, but they're letting you keep your job.
Exactly.
And changing it to the other way of like, well, irregardless of what they want, I'm going to do my best with the tools that I have, and I'm going to make opportunities myself, and I'm going to have enough in the fire that if one, log happens to go out, we're still going strong. And that's been by far taking action and doing and creating and being our own, creators in a sense, or our own leaders, has been incredibly helpful, mentally, physically, monetarily, in every aspect of our lives. By doing, it really does help with quality of life and happiness in
And
so
it's
many ways.
empowering. Exactly as you said, it's empowering. You're taking the control of your life back. You can always be impacted by outside forces. Please don't take what we're talking about in that sense, that if you take action, step out of your comfort zone, you'll never have problems again. That's not true at all. You just have to come to a place that's okay. And you kind of take some of that control from the universe back, right? You feel more confident that you own your life and your direction. And, maybe there's a side gig. Maybe there's a passion you want to chase that could alleviate that fear of exactly what you said, of someone allowing me to keep my job. What kind of way is that to live for people? And I realized I've done this my whole life. Everyone does this who has a normal job. They are at the whim of someone else. And that's a scary place to be, especially when you've experienced how someone else can take that away from you pretty quickly. So you control
Well,
it.
and like you said too, where if you do everything, things aren't going to guarantee to be okay. I'll tell you, they're not going to be okay. There's going to be a lot of hurt and pain in there. And in this book that I was been reading about, where it talked about energy and knowledge and things like that, it also talked about pain and how pain in itself is in every living being that there is, because it causes action.
Yeah.
If this and the degree of pain you feel is the amount of the quick swiftness of action. If you have like, a little blister on your foot or something like that, you're not going to take the same amount of quick movement that you would if you had like a thorn deep within it. So the degree of pain and damages it's causing causes the amount of action that you have to do.
Okay.
Yeah, so because you're going out there and you're feeling that pain, just means that you're going to move and adjust and keep taking action in itself. So you should, one, having some failure, having some pain, having some friction is just an understanding that that's a good part of the process. Just like working out, you feel the burn afterwards. That's you come to embrace those things. So any setbacks or roadblocks or friction points or upset customers you might have, or some person that you're working with who might frustrate you, that's a good thing. That's all a part of the process to help you grow and move forward with that. So yeah, by taking action, it's going to be hard, and as long as you're not doing it silly, like hurt, like going so above and beyond dangerously that you can, lose everything. And you could take this back to weightlifting. You don't want to all of a sudden like, I'm going to start weightlifting and load up 300 pounds on the bar and have someone prop you up and let go, because that's just going to end. That's just going to end in catastrophe. You shouldn't do the same in your professional life, or with your creative endeavors, or anything that you want to do. You want to be smart and calculated and figure out where you are and take steps to move forward.
Beautiful. That's well said. I really like that concept that the more pain you experience can drive, well, not necessarily the more, but the different types of pain and levels of pain can drive different action. I really like that concept. It makes perfect sense. I've never considered it like that before. I'm gonna have to get this book name from you. This is resonating with me. But all right. So that's 2022. It's done, over. We had some good times. We had some bad times. It was done. Now we are in 2023. I am approaching my 20-year high school reunion. Oh dear. What's in store, Tanner? Where are we going in 2023? And let's not say we, although you and I are attached however much you like it right now, because I can't let you out of this podcast. No, Tanner doesn't want to leave the podcast. What, not resolutions, I'm not saying that word, goals. What are you hoping to achieve in 2023, Tanner? Personally, professionally, athletically, whatever. What have you been dwelling on for this upcoming year?
So for me, it's continuing to move forward, but more focused. Like I was saying, one of my biggest failures is really that of hyper fixating on the wrong things in so many ways. I spent quite a bit of time this last year just trying to figure out how not to ruminate on things that are outside of my control. So many times that throws me into these negative spirals. And even just a few weeks ago, I was in just a terrible mood for like 5 days. I, again, just kind of slipped back into an old rut of mental frustration and just being negative, and it affected me personally. It affected me professionally, and these things. And I'm like, this is not the type of person I want to be. Why am I spending so much mental time on this? And so as we go into 2023, one of my biggest things is focus. And I kind of want to do that. We talked about sprints in a previous episode.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to do that, have like focused periods of development to improve myself, but do it strategically in a way that will better to my short-term goals as well as some of my long-term goals. So that energy that I would have spent just scrolling on the internet or watching random YouTube videos, and sure, I'm learning lots of things, but does the knowledge that I'm getting actually matter? Does it matter what's happening in today's political scene, or maybe some drama happening in some state that I don't live in, or some country that I don't know? Why am I filling my head with these things and actually put it towards something that I can put to practical use? So one of my things, and I wanted to talk with you about it here on the podcast, is maybe like a 1 month sprint. I guess before we go into that, explain to the audience what a sprint is.
Sure.
So we should start with that.
Several episodes ago, I was talking about professionally my day job. I achieved a new certification. It's a Scrum Master. And if you're not familiar with what a Scrum Master is, it's kind of like, even though Scrum Masters would never admit this, it's kind of like project management for tech. It's someone who keeps people on the straight and narrow on the track of developing software, upgrades, things like, it's typically for software. It can be used for lots of other things, but typically you'll find it in tech companies. And it's a format to break a very complicated process down into bite-sized chunks. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Scrum sprints are that. They are bite-sized elements of a much larger beast. And in the tech world, a sprint is typically 2 weeks, sometimes a little longer if it's that complicated, but 2 weeks to accomplish something. You get XYZ done by 2 weeks. That's your job. And then when 2 weeks is over, it's done. It's over. You have a piece of that software. You have a piece of that product. That puzzle is complete. And you move on to the next piece. And you keep doing this. You keep having these sprints, these tiny bite-sized things, and they allow you to focus on one thing at a time, or a couple things at a time, instead of the massive picture. If someone was saying, hey, random developer dude, I want you to recreate Salesforce, but I want you to make it even better. That person would go home that night and say, what? How do I do that? That is a massive undertaking. That's a huge task. Instead, this allows you to break things down and go step by step. Okay, first thing, if I wanted to recreate a Salesforce, what would I need? well, I need to develop the back end, maybe a CRM part. That should be pretty simple. That's a database. Okay, sprint one, I'm going to create a back end database. That's it. And then in 2 weeks, you have a back end database. It looks nothing like a Salesforce. It doesn't even operate probably. It's probably full of bugs, but it's created. And then you move on to the next piece. And the puzzles come together after a while. So I love the concept, and I'm glad you did this because I talked about it in the podcast where we talked about this. I'm a firm believer that sprints could be used in so many aspects of our lives. So many times we look at a monstrous task ahead of us and get terrified. And what happens when you're terrified? You freeze and you don't do the action. So instead of focusing on what you need to, what you want to accomplish, you focus on the small thing. I want to be a billionaire. Cool. So do I. How do you do that? I don't know. I'm going to go make my own business. Cool. How do you do that? Those are too big. You can't focus on that. You'll never accomplish that. Instead, you say, hey, I can start a podcast. Bought a microphone and a stand, some headphones for like $100, and here I am. That is step one. That's a sprint to becoming a billionaire if that was your goal. So no, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and so my goal is, in some ways, who do I want to be every day? And so, and part of that is, again, it's like eating an elephant. There's too much to do at one time. So the ultimate goal is to not be beholden to just the whims of my phone and all of this, dopaminergic stuff that happens, but be very focused, be very present. Those are huge things that I want to work towards. But also, I want to really be an effective creator. So we talk about, starting our business and those things, or this podcast, or have ideas for stories and art and all this stuff that I've always wanted to do and have ideas. And I really want to change myself from being like an idea person to really being an executor. So my thought is, if we go into these sprints, perhaps 2 weeks is a little too quick for a lot of them, but maybe we can do them in month chunks or something like that, and find 12 pieces that I would like to learn as tools to allow me to then get to a better job of being a creator. So some of those might be pieces of software that I need to not have as barriers, but enablement, like as tools, so I can just execute on those. So whether that be film editing or website creation or better uses for user experience design, all things that we want to use in our products, but things that we use in everything to provide value, communicate to the world, pieces like that, but also different aspects of trying to get off my phone, or maybe if there's a certain food that I know that I can't get away from, have certain dedicated efforts, sprints that I can hold accountable to you, to the audience, things like that, but also talk about my journey and trying to learn those things or develop those habits. So that's one of my goals for this year, is to be a little bit more publicly accountable, be strategic with it, and hopefully be more focused and a better person by the time we're done with it.
Love it. That's awesome. That's well said. And I agree, wanting to be a better person every single day. When you look at it from a year perspective of who do you want to be this time next year, that's a lot. I mean, what do I know? 12 months is a long time, but I have a lot of control over who I am today. Right. I love that. I love that concept. And as for cutting down on software, or just simple things like that. I get it. Like, with work computers, my private computers, my phone, there's so many crap apps and things like that. You talked about getting rid of apps and things like that. Like, one of the coolest things I ever did for my mental health, and it was stupid simple. One of the best things I ever did for my mental health was I removed my email icon from my home screen of my phone. That simple. Like, I can't do without email, so I have to have email. I can't just cancel my Gmail accounts or whatever, or my work email. But I can put it out of sight, out of sight, out of mind type situation. I used to check my email. I have probably, with work, 5-6 email accounts. I used to check every one of them many, many, many times a day. And I don't know why. I don't know if I was necessarily always looking for something, like expecting something. I just always assumed there'd be something interesting there, and I checked it all the time. I deleted it from my homepage. Easy. Sometimes I forget to check my email now.
Yeah. Well, let me put it in this context too. I love the example that you gave where let's say that you compare every time you were checking your email to every time where maybe you would snack on something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about these bad habits we have mentally and try to think about how they would translate over to something physical, if every time you do these bad habits, you scroll, instead of just scrolling, you're also eating or something like that, you can get the picture then of how physically big you would be, how,
Yeah.
how unfit, unhealthy you would ultimately be. And so in many ways of how, last year has been a goal of kind of reshaping our bodies physically to have healthier and more energy and more sustainable. This year, in so many ways, it's to strengthen our minds to
Mm-hmm.
become less sloppy, less jiggly, more fit, tight, but also more effective. Just like how we can lift more weight, we can run farther, have more endurance, bike for longer. Well, then we can be focused longer. We have better knowledge of how to do processes to create things, how all this other part. So ultimately, I guess that's a better way for me to communicate kind of who I want to be going into this next year. And I know I'm not going to be just like I'm not some 2% body fat bodybuilder.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the goal. I don't want to be Mr. Perfect by the end of 2023, but I don't want to be, quote, overweight anymore. I want to be healthy. And so just taking that into my mental and into my creative, productive self, that's who I want to be in 2023.
Love it. It reminds me of a quote. Um, you're full of book knowledge. I'm full of quotes. Um, the quote is, "It's never you against other people. It's always you against past you." And that's really why we got on this topic. Is I started thinking about past Wyatt. Um, I've gotten to a really cool point, and any of our listeners, I hope you comment on this because I would love for someone else's perspective. And Tanner, we've talked about this. 30s have been awesome for me. My 30s have been, give or take some hardships and things like that, have been awesome mentally in my ability to not care about other people's opinions. I am started living for Wyatt, and it has been life altering. So now I don't compare myself to a coworker or a friend or a neighbor. I have to consciously compare myself to past Wyatt. Where was I last year? Where was I 10 years ago? Um, who was I 20 years ago? I mentioned my high school reunion. Who was Wyatt when he was a senior in high school? Is a vastly different person than Wyatt in 36. And that has done wonders for me, being in my 30s and being, what does Wyatt want? And then making those moves for it. And comparing yourself only to your past self is the best mental thing I've ever done for myself, I think. But yeah. All right. So you were leading to an assignment, it sounds like. No. Let's go back to that sprint comment. What were you talking
Yes.
about?
So, getting in just to alignment with what we're working on with our stuff. So, I believe 30 days focus on something
Mm-hmm.
should be about right. So, for this first month, I really want to get very proficient with Figma. Um, so this is a tool that you can use to design user interfaces, build mockups, help ultimately just do layouts for websites, applications, products, things like that. We're kind of building landing pages and application links, and I want that to be me to be proficient enough to where we can effectively use that as a resource, not a barrier to ex- externalize our ideas and bring them into reality. So for the next 30 days, I have a Skillshare membership. There's online tutorials, there's these things. Just dedicate some time each day
Mm-hmm.
to learning and practicing and doing stuff. So by the end of the month, again, it's no longer a barrier, but it's a tool in my pocket, tool in my toolbox, something that I
Absolutely.
can use without friction to create. So that's kind of this first month for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll kind of document my journey throughout the month, but ultimately, it's just a way of accountability by stating it publicly as well. Um, what I'm doing, and then hopefully provide value to the audience by, if it's worthwhile and it's something that you can use for starting your business or take your business to the next level. I want to do that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of the first month.
Okay. I like it. And I think you and I are in similar mindsets. Mine's not about learning tools. Of this relationship between you and I, you are the technical minded person of the group. I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, what the hell am I providing? But what my passion project for myself in this upcoming year is to really stop half-assing things. Let me explain that. I'm an expert at leisure. Expert. I have leisure down to an art. Unfortunately, that doesn't bode well when I want to be productive, because I am very good at talking myself out of doing things. Either I can push it off and procrastinate it, or it's not that important, or I'll just drop it and no one will notice type situation. But personally, I want to follow through. And kind of my goal is similar. It's focused on this podcast. It's focused on our business, on our product. I want to really focus on content for me. That's what I would like to better myself at, is not saying that's good enough. I want to put out quality content. And that's in the form of this podcast. That's in the form of maybe a blog or side projects, or really just stop telling myself that's good enough. And how can I make this that much better? How can I make the quality I output from my brain and spit it out into some sort of format? How can I make that quality better? And the best way I can affect that is really taking each piece, each thing I want to create, each thing I want to do, and diving headfirst in sprints. Content can be like sprints. And instead of looking at, all this social media outreach and podcast topics, and oh my gosh, it's overwhelming. How do I plan all this stuff? Take it one step at a time. And what do we need today? Oh, we need some podcast topics? Too easy. Let's figure that out. What do we need today? Oh, we need a blog post. Or Wyatt finally needs to get off his butt and start posting on TikTok. Things like that. That's what I am going to begin working on myself. And I like the concept, exactly like you said, of putting this out publicly. Guys, you're going to see social media from us. I swear. I've got this plan. I'm working on it. My wife used to be a social media manager, and she's given me some tips and tricks. And, I feel like I have the knowledge and I have the ability to do it. And I just need to stop half-assing it and just go all whole ass it. Is that you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So no, that's great. I think in some weird way we're aligned in our goals, even though we haven't talked about this, but I love it.
No. And what's great about both of ours is they're measurable, right? So
smart goals.
I can come back to the end of the period and I have a certain amount of proficiency that I can then communicate to others, show the value of it, and be able to use that tool or that system or understand that concept effectively. Whatever, again, I'm focusing on to hit my goals. And then you, with your content, you can measure how much engagement we're getting based off those things, the feedback we're receiving, because you're doing it publicly and externally, and you're actually working with people, they can provide the feedback.
Right.
And so it's such a wonderful thing. So because one of the hardest things as you were saying that, like, how do you know, where's the line between half-assing it and enough? Well, that's for our audience to decide, right?
Absolutely.
That's for the results to show. If you are working hard and we're getting no results from it, maybe we're not working smart and we need to refocus on what you're doing. But if we are getting a great return on your investment, then we know you're doing it right and you're doing it of a quality that is appropriate, and you can use that to move forward. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. So that gave me a wonderful idea, Tanner. I'm about to sign you up for something, but I'm signing myself up too, so it's okay. So because you said the word sprint, and now I'm suddenly back into Scrum Master stuff. At the end of each sprint, so there can be tons of sprints to accomplish product, right? At the end of each sprint, they have what's called a retrospective. And a retrospective is when all the parties involved, the product owners and the developers or whoever is involved in all of this, get together in a meeting, in a room, less than a couple hours maybe, and they go over what went well, what didn't go well, what can we improve, what resources do we need to make this better next time. And then the second that retrospective meeting is over, the next sprint starts. That's it. Of course there's some planning stuff, but details. But so let's make a promise, Tanner. In 4 weeks, let's come back on this podcast and have a retrospective of our first month. You are going to focus on learning new systems, things like Figma, which will benefit our product, which is going to benefit your individual knowledge. And other things, video editing. You were texting me earlier about this video editing software that seems way too advanced for me, but more power to you. But we'll come back and we'll discuss how you did in that, and then similar, we'll look at engagement and social media and content and hold ourselves accountable. And because if we can't come back and say, hey, I dropped the ball again, there's lazy Wyatt. I promise to do better. If we can't do that, we're not being honest with ourselves. We're not being honest with our audience. So what do you say? 4-week retrospective?
Yep, sounds perfect. And then we'll, and on our own too, we can kind of build out our daily routines and things to help enable us to do that again. Just to compare it, just like the gym, it's like we can come back and say like, yeah, this is what I can lift now. This is what I can squat. This is what I can bench. And we can track that progress. And that's fantastic. But the more important part of this too is the showing up every day, the going to the gym, or in our case, our learning journey and those things. So yeah, I'm excited we can talk about that. It can be almost a special podcast episode in its own, because the one thing that we are doing more and more now, as we kind of wrap up this episode, is we're going to do lots more interviews. I know you've been talking to quite a few different people. I have as well. We have a few people lined up already for this month. Really, really excited to, not just focus on us and our journey or our knowledge, but I really am excited to learn from others and share all of their knowledge and their experiences with everybody else too, because I think that's going to be way more valuable.
Totally. I think we probably have 6 to 9
nice
individuals who want to come on the show, who want to talk about their experience, who want to talk about their obstacles they overcame in starting their own business. And some live rural, some live in other countries. We have 2 individuals from the UK who want to jump on with us. It's just, it's cool. And we're getting momentum. And shout out to the current listeners. If you want to be on this podcast and you have a story to tell, some obstacles you overcame, something you created that was, a challenge, and the steps you took to do that, reach out to us. We want to talk to you because neither Tanner nor I want to sit on this podcast every week and talk about ourselves. We want to talk about other people, and there are so many experiences out there that people can benefit from. So any of those listeners out there, seriously, if you have a story, maybe you haven't started a business, maybe you thought about it, maybe you did and it failed. If you feel brave enough and comfortable enough to come on and talk about those things, people can learn from that. And the best way to learn is not from your own mistakes, but from others. So I love it. We've got a sweet lineup coming. A lot of great things, Tanner. 7 months in of this podcast, we have interviews lined up from the UK. What are we doing, man? Where's this going? That's awesome. No, I love it. We'll come back in 4 weeks. We'll retrospect ourselves in our first month's goal here. Our first sprint, if you will. And lots of interviews coming in, lots of fascinating people with very successful businesses, people with failed businesses. There's a plethora of knowledge coming your way, and not from Tanner or I. So, but yeah, Tanner, great podcast, man. Wrap it up for us.
Yeah, sounds great. 2022 was a great transformational year, but I really feel like 2023 is going to be rocket fuel, rocket ships to the moon this year. So excited for doing it publicly, documenting this journey, and yeah, just excited for all the weeks to come. Thank you again for everyone who's made it to this far in the podcast. Just as always, if you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe. It does help. Our numbers, our LinkedIn somehow just like doubled in like a week. It's fantastic. So we've been getting really great response. Reach out, comment on videos, email us directly, message us on any of the platforms. We'd love to talk with you, get feedback, improve every week. And yeah, thanks again for listening. So we will catch you all next week.
To the moon.